Welcome to Marci Talks Money and Life with your host, Money Marci.
Hello, I am Money Marci. Welcome. I am excited to welcome today's guest, Gini Trask. Born into a family of entrepreneurs, business is simply second nature to Gini. She began her first business at the age of 16 and never stopped. Gini has owned and grown numerous small businesses from incubation into the multi-millions and continues to help other small business owners optimize their ventures. She is passionate about helping entrepreneurs create businesses that serve their life and the world at large. Welcome, Gini.
Thank you so much, Marci. It's such an honor to be here.
You're too kind. What kind of entrepreneur and businesses did you see growing up?
Well, most of my family, they owned larger small businesses, is kind of the best way to put it. So my brothers and my dad are all in construction. My stepmother owned a very successful catering company and wedding venue. My sister was a successful photographer, for especially wedding and portrait photographer. Because all my family, there's a huge age gap in my family. So all my brothers and sisters are 20 years older than me. Luckily for me, I got to lean on all of their missteps and right steps too. I got to lean on all that growing up and really got just a front row seat to them growing their businesses, which when I grew up and wanted to own my own business, made things a lot easier for me.
So did you always think, I'm going to be an entrepreneur when I grow up, I'm going to work for myself?
It's funny, I did. So my first job was at 12 years old. My parents started teaching me accounting for their construction business. And I learned how to code invoices and things like that. But I always assumed I would grow up and work either in the family business and then take it over or own my own business. So when I did go to college, but even then I got a degree in acting. I got accepted to a very, very difficult to get into acting program. And I went ahead and said yes. And then I just took all the business classes that I could and wound up actually falling into recreation and tourism. I took every single class my college offered on recreation and tourism. And that was the first business that I really went into out of college was the transportation, which just falls right into recreation and tourism.
That's awesome. I love acting. I don't know if you caught the episode from last season where I talked about how theater kids can do anything, and I had two actors on my show together, actors in improv, and it was a really fun show with a lot of good information. So do you find yourself using the skills you learned as an actor?
I do, especially the improv skills, right? I do truly believe in being authentic when you're conducting business. So not acting from that standpoint, but actual true acting really is tapping into the parts of yourself that align with that character. And so if you can look at it that way, that, in order to relate to a customer, if I can really put myself in their shoes, I think it's like radical empathy, right? If I can really put myself in that customer's shoes and really feel the world from their perspective, it helps me to better serve that person. And that's where I think one place acting really contributed. The second is I actually did lead an improv for many years here in Houston, Texas. And people would come and we did what we call drop-in improv. And just that ability to sort of not know what's going to happen and to just, go with the flow and think on your feet was super helpful. And now I work with speakers. I have the Aligned Speaker Academy. And of course, all of that really does feed into my speaker coaching.
That is definitely true. Did you see the challenges that your family went through in their entrepreneur businesses, and how did that shape how you approached your own businesses?
That definitely did. That's a great question. Yeah, seeing them growing up and the challenges they faced. There's a couple challenges that really stick out. One challenge that stuck out from my dad was just not really having the cushion, just sort of believing that, well, he can always get that next job. He's always going to win that next bid, and not laying out cushion and operating cushion. I know that you work with people in their finances as a CPA. He always thought I'll just make more money. Right? Instead of setting back some capital for operating when times are lean. That was a big learning lesson. Being diversified in your client base is another piece, right? Not putting all your eggs in one basket. And then with my stepmom, it was actually interesting. She wound up growing a wedding venue up to, the first weekend they did a wedding, it was like they did 2 or 3 weddings and they thought they were all going to pass out from exhaustion. By the time she sold the business, they did something like 60 weddings the weekend, like the week that they sold the business. And so they really increased their operating capacity. And what was interesting was to watch her approach that business and see everything she put into place to make that business owner that bought the business successful, right? Because of course, when you sell a business, it's important that the business is able to go on without you. And it was really, I think, hugely valuable to see, everything, all the processes and procedures that she documented, everything that she did in order to make that sale successful.
That's true. A lot of times when you sell a business, you get a certain continuing payment based on how successful they are for a period of time. I'm not sure in a wedding venue. In an accounting business, it's obviously if clients stay with you and you get a percentage of things, or depending on the terms of the contract when you hand off. I like that you brought up that as an entrepreneur, he was always hoping his next contract. Obviously, when you're an employee, you reasonably know, I'm going to get paid next week, and it's going to be about this much, adjusted for any overtime or various other payroll adjustments that might come into play this payroll period. So the emergency fund and how you fund it and what you expect from it is different than when you're an entrepreneur. And depending on the business, depending on how often you get paid and all of those kind of things, you end up with, oh, wait a second, I don't have any work this week, or I don't have any money coming in this week. How have you been able to work around that? Do you build a bigger fund? Do you kind of keep track of that?
Yeah, I do it right off. So the way that I operate now is that every payment that we receive, 1/3 goes to operating, 1/3 goes to like a reserve account. And then 1/3 actually goes to pay me out, just because I don't have a lot of overhead anymore. I've run companies that have enormous overhead. I once had a company that our margin was only about 7%, right? So enormous operating capital. So now my operating expenses are extremely low. So we take 1/3 and put it in reserve for the future, 1/3 for operating expenses, and 1/3 goes to my pay.
Okay. I love that every question brings up more things. So yeah, we talk about those overhead, those fixed costs. Certainly as more and more people, especially entrepreneurs, have transitioned to working at home and not necessarily needing office space, or, being able to have remote employees allows you to have less office space, less overhead from that. Were you already transitioning into a low overhead business?
It's actually interesting. No, I wasn't. From a human operations standpoint, when we went into COVID, I owned a travel company that was doing about $5 million a year in business when we went into COVID. We had just moved into a larger office space that was absolutely gorgeous, but it actually was pretty low cost, including, my rent was I had a 1,400 square foot office space and I was paying $1,000 a month in rent for it. It was not a bad deal. I kept it probably a little longer than I should have. The challenging part with that business was we always had pretty much zero income in the first quarter of the year. We made all of our income in the second, third, and fourth quarters of the year. So going into COVID, of course, COVID started in March, right? End of first quarter. So I had been floating all of my payroll for that quarter, like I always did. But then, of course, there would be no second, third, and fourth quarter for the travel industry in that year. I did wind up still doing just under $1 million in revenue that year, but we had to lay folks off. So COVID really kind of, unfortunately, did force us to lay off pretty much everyone except myself at the time. And then what I started doing was just paying people on a contract basis. So I had gotten rid of the personnel overhead pretty early on during COVID. But I held on to that office space. Boy, I held on to that office space until actually about 6 months ago. I've only recently gotten rid of it. I wound up subcontracting it for a venue for events, for small events, private events. So I made some money back there. And then I also would have my own events there because I do teach public speaking. So I would have my own speaker events there. But I finally decided to let it go. And I'll tell you guys, the best thing you can do is to be quick and nimble when it comes to reducing costs. The moment that you find you don't need something, get rid of it. We cannot be sentimental about these things in business. I was a little too sentimental about that office space for a little too long.
Yeah, well, both within our personal lives and our professional lives, it's so hard to let go of something that once upon a time was useful and you don't know. It's like they talk about cleaning out your closet. If you haven't worn it in a year, chances are you're not going to wear it tomorrow.
Right.
So let's talk about the public speaking, because obviously, hey, I'm a podcaster. Podcasts are everywhere. No matter what business you're in, you're probably doing more public speaking via the internet, even if not in front of a personal crowd, than we ever have before. Does that impact how you're teaching public speaking, or the clients you get?
Yeah, absolutely. People are definitely recognizing that they just absolutely have to at this point to in order to be in business, you must get comfortable speaking, right? Unless you're or you've got to have someone on the team that can do it, right? If you as the owner can't do it, you've got to have someone on the team that really can. What I find people struggle with the most is being able to read the label on their jar of magic. As business owners, we all do some kind of magic in the world. Your service is solving a problem for someone, and for that person, it is life-saving. If you are an amazing CPA and you are shining a light for these people on their business finances, helping them to save money, to pay less money out in taxes, because that's, to me, CPAs are such powerful parts of our business, but whatever it is that you do, it is magic to someone. It is life-saving to someone else, the thing that you do for a living, the thing that you do for a business. But so often we have a difficult time articulating it, and we have some fear. Of course, public speaking is the most feared thing in the world, more so than death. Most people would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. But it's true. They've done surveys. But it's crucial. It's crucial. And what I want to tell people out there that are nervous is, number one, authenticity wins. Nowadays, especially, since COVID, and where everyone's on Zoom and everyone's used to seeing each other's, messy house, or the kids running through the background, or whatever, the lawn guys out front, making all kinds of racket that you can't speak, because that's about to happen, is what I'm saying. Is my lawn guys are actually about to show up, Marci. I can't seem to stop it. But no, whatever's happening, right? The world has gotten a lot more accepting of these things, and what people want to see now is they want to see authenticity. So it used to be that the name of the game in terms of marketing was just showing what an absolute and total expert you are. And while that is still important, people do want to work with experts. People have realized that they want to work with other humans. They want the human side of your business, and that means being authentic. And if that means that you're nervous to get on camera, one of my students, when she first started doing Facebook Live, she would wear a fake horse head, like a Halloween mask. She's like, "This is it. This is how I'm starting." But she started. And people appreciated that she was willing to be vulnerable about being afraid to be out there. Afraid or not, you've got to get out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially as an entrepreneur, if you've got a small business, you want people to know who you are. You have to be somewhere. You have to network. You have to show yourself. Every time I have someone on a podcast, it's kind of like a commercial for who they are or what they offer, because that's what we're doing. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, no, I love to hear that. You've been coaching speakers for how long now?
Since 2018. So that's really, and even before that, I actually did a lot of acting coaching and that type of thing, but I really moved it more into public speaking in 2018. It started out, I was in a speaker coaching program that actually didn't have a lot of coaching. The program was very expensive, and what it did was, it started out with, they gave you a formula, and you went to like a boot camp, and you worked really deeply on your talk there. And then they got you on, which most speaking programs don't actually get you on stages. Mine does both, does the coaching and the stages, but a lot don't. And so they would get you on stages, and they gave you a formula, but there wasn't a lot of feedback. So I actually started out by giving the other students like feedback from what I had learned in acting, in terms of stage presence and in terms of crafting their message, and everything I'd learned from improv. And so that's how it started. And then it grew. And as I started to explore other speaker coaching programs, I started to kind of notice the things that were gaps, and I just sort of started to fill them in. And my program was actually born really organically. I didn't intend at all to be a speaker coach, but I found that people needed a few things. One, they needed to be able to read the label on their jar of magic. Two, they needed permission to put down all the things that weren't working for them. out of other programs. All of us want to be good students. And so we try to do like, I'm going to just do it exactly the way Tony Robbins says, or I'm going to do it exactly the way that this teacher says. But if it's not aligned with who we are, it's going to come off as inauthentic. And we talked earlier, like authenticity wins. And then honestly, guys, it's speaking as an iterative process. Like, how do you become an NFL quarterback? Well, you play a lot of football. Right? How do you become a great speaker? You do a lot of speaking. You just do a lot of speaking. So that's why our program focuses on 2 stages a week, getting you on 2 stages a week, getting you coaching so that those stages are in the end producing the results that you want. Because a lot of people get on stage, but they don't get the results they want. Or they practice a lot at home or with a small group like Toastmasters, but they don't actually get out in the world and speak.
Okay. That's important. Absolutely.
And you said it earlier, there's a lot, when we kind of started, you said, there's a lot of podcasts out there in the world, a lot of things like that. Podcasting is the number one way that we teach our clients to get the word out about themselves, but not creating their own podcast, but being a guest on other people's podcasts. We like to see our folks getting on 2 stages a week because, it's not just that you're practicing and you're honing your message and you're getting your magic out there. There's very real data around this. The SEO and the GEO, guys. So GEO is the new thing. GEO is what AI picks up when AI goes out looking for answers. The more that you can get out on podcasts, especially, and speak, the more that GEO is going to be able to pick up your name coupled with your magic and that your message, right? So GEO is really truly the name of the game right now. And podcast guesting is one of the best ways to increase your GEO.
And the AI doesn't pick it up the same way the SEO does. So those are actually 2 different.
They are different. Yeah. GEO really loves anything, especially that's an authority stage. So GEO likes press releases. It likes podcasts. It likes anything where you're being featured as an expert. Right? So SEO, anybody can get an SEO company to write up a bunch of SEO and a bunch of keywords for their website. In this case, you're literally being featured as an expert on someone else's platform, on someone else's show. And GEO really likes that. I have a client that worked with me 3 years ago that really took the 2 stages a week thing to heart. And he is now showing up in people's AI search engines. Like, people are like, oh my God, I did an AI search and here you are. Like, I've seen it more than once now, people tagging him on Facebook and saying, oh my gosh, you showed up in my AI indexed search for the thing I was searching.
Look at that. I have you on and I'm learning things. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go back to finances because,
Yes.
money's my thing. What kind of financial lessons did you learn growing up and how are you implementing them or changing them? Because sometimes the lessons we learn are what we should do and sometimes the lessons we learn are what we shouldn't do.
Yeah, absolutely. What lessons did I learn growing up financially? Wow, my dad was absolutely terrible with finances. Again, his whole thought was, I can always make more. Well, what happened was when I was in college, my dad actually became paralyzed and was no longer able to work or run a business. He fell out on a job site. He owned a construction company and he fell out on a job site and literally broke his back and was in a wheelchair. And they told him he would never walk again. Now, my dad did eventually walk again, but again, he had not laid a foundation in his business. Number one, that anyone could take over for him, right? He was the company and no one could really take over and do what he did. He was doing the estimating. He was doing the project management. He was doing all these things in the business. There was no one else to take over. And he had 0 runway. He was literally living paycheck to paycheck in his business. So I learned that I really didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck in my business, right? Which has led me back to, kind of my 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And guys, that's not a blanket. Guys, talk to Marci. That's not a blanket answer in every business. I've been an accountant many times for business owners. I've done accounting. I've done my own accounting in a lot of my businesses. I have actually been an accountant in other people's businesses. I don't want you guys to go, oh, I'll just do what Gini does and do a third, and a third. But for my business and the way it's structured, that does work. So the number one thing that I learned was to create that cushion and how important that is. The number 2 thing that I think, and really I learned from my stepmother, who was an accountant, right? She always has had a backup. She's always had that emergency fund, not just in life, but in the business, to have that little bit of an emergency fund. And one of the big things that I think I've really learned lately is to really ask myself, do I need this excessive thing that I think that I need. I really do ask myself, if I hold off on this one purchase, what else could I have instead? So one thing I've started doing, I'm a gardener, and I have a cutting garden with flowers. I always have fresh flowers in my house. But I used to always go and buy like little filler flowers, like just at the grocery store. When I go to the grocery store, I just buy like one little bouquet of filler flowers. Well, I realized that for the same cost as those filler flowers, I could stop by Home Depot on my way home and I could get a live plant and I could plant it. And it would actually be less money. And now I don't need filler flowers. Now I have all of these other flowers that I could plant, right? And so how can you just, I guess, make your money work better for you by, buying things that are renewable, reusable, things that are not one-time use, things that are going to actually create more abundance in your life, more opportunity in your life, For example, I'm all for spending money on stages if they're the right stages. We have clients that come to us all the time and they're like, oh, I got to buy this. I need to pay to speak at this thing. I need to pay to speak at this thing. And the first thing that we want you to look at is your conversion. Don't pay if it's not converting. Same thing with ads, right?
Okay, for listeners that may not know, please tell them what conversion is.
Okay, so conversion is your ability to convert leads into sales, or if you're speaking, it's to convert the audience even into leads. So everybody out there who's taking away from this conversation that they need to be out speaking. Yes, you need to be speaking. And yes, speaking is great for SEO and GEO. And we also want to be transforming that audience into leads that get onto our mailing list. And let me be clear about what a lead is, Marci. A lead is not a follower on Facebook. Followers on Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those places, you have no control over your communication with them. The platform controls your communication. How many of you guys have ever posted and had 0 people see your post, right? Happens all the time. So what we want to focus on is getting email addresses or phone numbers, but I prefer email addresses because you can choose when you communicate with a subscriber to your mailing list. You can send a mail every single day if you want. And we actually do recommend that you mail at least 3 times a week to your list. Now there's ways to do that, and there's certain things you do and don't want to do about that. But that's, so number one, we want to create conversion from our talk, getting those folks to actually take action with us. And then from there, converting those leads to sales. So when I say conversion, that's what I mean. And a lot of folks are paying for ads on Facebook and they're just getting them more followers. They're not actually getting them email addresses. That's not super beneficial. We always want to be looking at anything we spend in our business. Is it getting a return? Are we getting a return on that investment? Right? And I guess that's really in a way what I was saying, right? I get a better return on my investment when I stop by Home Depot and buy a live plant than I do if I go and buy a plant that's going to die in 5 days. Right? I go and buy cut plants. How are the things that you're investing in? How are they returning? And if they're not returning, let's look at something else.
That makes sense. I guess let's talk about mindset, because I know that's also part of the things that you talk about. So what can you tell me about how you view and how you work with people to shift their mindset?
Yeah, so the first thing that I do to help shift people's mindset is to help them to realize that the thing that is ordinary to you is magic to someone else. A lot of us think that we have to add more into our packages, or we're trying to create an offer or a thing in the world that it's very complicated. It's very, we're always trying to create all this enormous value and all of these things. When a lot of times, like I said, I help people read the label on their jar of magic. A lot of times there is something that you do that is so transformative. And it's so simple and people really need it, but you don't value it because it's easy for you. And a lot of us have learned that we're supposed to work hard and good things will come. Work harder, work smarter, but it's still all about striving. And for a lot of folks, they really do feel like if they're not striving, that they don't deserve to make money doing the thing. Or if they're not striving, that it's somehow not okay. But the truth is that there is something that is ordinary and easy for you that is really, really, really hard for someone else. And just by sharing your magic that is so simple and ordinary to you, you are changing their life. And that means that doesn't necessarily have to be hard, and it doesn't necessarily have to be complicated. So that's the first mindset shift that I work on with people.
That's huge. I tell people all the time, something is easy when you know how, and it's hard when you don't know how, and you have to appreciate the value of what it took you to learn to make that easy.
Absolutely, right? And you don't have to be that far ahead. So the next mindset piece is thinking that you have to learn everything or know everything before you can help someone else. That's not true. A senior in high school is an absolute expert and a genius to a freshman in high school, right? They know all the good classes to take. They know all the easy professors, right? They know, how you can sneak off campus. You should not be sneaking off campus, but I'm just saying, right? They know all these things, but a freshman comes in and they feel totally out of place, and they feel overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. But that senior, they know exactly what to do. And so you don't actually have to be that far ahead. You can help the you from 2 years ago, right? If you're just that little bit ahead. And people get really stuck not moving forward with their ideas or their businesses because they think they need that next certification, that next education, that next piece, when in reality, you have something inside of you right now that helps someone. And by getting ready to get ready, you're delaying, and now that person isn't going to get your help. They're going to get somebody else's help that's probably twice the price and probably not quite as good as you, but because you were getting ready and that other person was just doing it, right? They're going to find them instead.
Wow, that's really solid. I hope you people out there are hearing that, because it's so important to remember that you are the expert to someone who knows less, and you have so much to offer just by helping them get to their next step.
Yeah.
Gini, is there anything that you'd like to cover that maybe we didn't mention yet?
Let me think. I think we've pretty much we've covered a lot of ground, right? So from a financial standpoint, just to recap, give yourself some runway, and you know what? I'll tell one more little interesting story. And Marci, I'm curious to see what you think about it. So I've owned and operated 6 multi-million-dollar companies, and several of them were my own. Some of them I literally grew them for other people. I was paid as the CEO or the general manager, I was paid to grow the company, to start it up and sell it, or, there was various iterations of me running these companies. And one of the interesting things that I did with my most successful, most stable company, my travel company, was I hired an employee before I could afford to pay myself, because it compounded the amount of work that I could get done in the company. And it was sort of like burning the boats. I'm now responsible for this other person. I have to make this business work. And I think that was one of the smartest things I ever did. So I was actually working 2 other jobs at the time. I was doing accounting for a construction company, and then I worked in a restaurant at night. And I was really getting my travel business off the ground. And I was making enough money that I could hire an employee. So I hired somebody part-time to start. And then the way that snowballed the business, the way that compounded, the amount of work that we could get done was unbelievable. And I right off, within like 3 months, was able to hire her full time. And then within another 3 months was able to quit both my jobs. And so I really do think that doing that accelerated the business. So just an interesting kind of really out of the box concept there, but yeah, I don't know if that helps anybody.
Well, and it does make sense. Obviously, it depends on the business whether it would make sense, and obviously the quality of the person that you hire, the knowledge they come in, the supervision they may or may not need. But absolutely, there are times that to grow, you need more help. You need a certain level of service that you can offer, and you can't do it by yourself. So if you want to grow it, you have to hire someone. That doesn't mean it fits for all businesses, but certainly it fit for yours, and the proof is in the story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that we grew that business to, again, about an annual revenue of just under 5 million a year. And then we managed about another 5 million of travel for another company. We just didn't run that revenue through our company. We got paid a management fee. But yeah, very successful company. And it was actually very stable. It's just once we came through COVID, I absolutely could have started that business back up again and gotten right back to where I was. I just decided that I wanted a simpler life and a simpler business. For anybody out there that's, not sure if they want to grow into the multiple millions, You don't have to. You get to decide what kind of business you want to have. And I enjoy a simple business. I do have another coach that works with me, and then we have a VA, but it's a very simple business right now. And I'm enjoying that. I enjoy not having all the human, overhead that I had in the previous business. And so it was a conscious choice to let go of that multi-million-dollar company. It was very much just I wanted something simpler. So for anybody out there, it's okay. It's okay to have a simple business. It's okay to not, it's really easy to take a product into the multiple millions when there's more zeros on the end of it. So keep that in mind when you're comparing yourself to others. The more zeros that your product has on the end of it, easier it is to make it to $1 million. That's just simple math.
Right, but you want to make sure the profit margin makes it worth the time and the effort you put into it.
Yes, I think we talked about this. I once
Yes.
worked with a company that had a negative 27% profit margin. So what does that mean, guys? That means for every $1 million they made, they lost $270,000. So at that point, more sales does not solve your problem. It makes it worse. We actually got in with a friend of mine and we turned it around. It is, margin is everything, guys. And Marci, of course, is an amazing CPA and can tell you guys that that's actually the most important part is your margin, right?
Right. It's not the money that comes in. It's not the gross income. It's the net profit. It's how much you take home at the end of the day, because you're trading your time for money. Even when you're an entrepreneur, to some extent, you're trading your time for money, and you want to make sure it's worth the time you put into it. Gini, thank you so much for being my guest today.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate the time you took and joining us here.
Absolutely. And, I really appreciate you having me. And is it okay if I give the audience a gift?
Absolutely. I will be sharing your links in the show notes, but let them know what's there.
So, we talked a little bit about conversion earlier, guys, and one of the most important things that you can have as you are speaking, especially whether it's on a Facebook Live, a LinkedIn Live, or on a podcast, is a great lead magnet. Marci had me explain conversion, right? We want to get those audience members actually moving forward with you, right? That's the beautiful part about speaking is when you speak, you offer people the opportunity to move forward in some area of their life. And so by offering a great lead magnet, you're able to offer them a way to move forward maybe with you if you're the right fit. So it is greatleadmagnet.com. Super simple. It'll be in the show notes, but we like to make it easy around here. So greatleadmagnet.com, and we'll actually walk you guys through what makes a great lead magnet, how to make a great lead magnet, especially a great lead magnet for speaking and getting that conversion when you speak.
Okay, so really check out what Gini offers. She's got a lot of great information, and who knows where it'll take you.
Well, thank you so much, Marci. I love the space that you're creating for people to have these talks about money, right? We don't talk enough about money in our lives. And one of the best things you guys can do to start getting in a better financial position is to listen to Marci's podcast and talk about money.
Boy, I think I'm going to turn that into an advertisement for me. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and stay tuned because I will see you next time. This has been Money Marci on Marci Talks Money and Life. You got this.